Try to remember what you had for lunch on a random Tuesday 3 weeks ago. You probably can't. Now try to remember the worst thing anyone ever said to you. It's right there, word for word, like it happened this morning. This isn't a coincidence, and it isn't because bad memories are more important. It's because your brain never actually tried to remember them equally in the first place. Most people assume memory works like a camera. Something happens, your brain records it, and later you press play. But that's not what's happening at all. Your brain isn't recording your life. It's constantly deciding in real time what's worth keeping and what's worth throwing away. And it is spectacularly biased about which is which. Here's where it starts. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus spent decades studying how memories form and how easily they distort. And one of her core findings was that memory isn't a fixed recording at all. It's a reconstruction, rebuilt slightly differently every single time you access it, which means every memory you have has already been edited, again and again, without your permission or awareness. But that still doesn't explain the bad memory problem. For that, you need to look at a much older part of the brain. Deep in your skull sits a small, almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux built much of his career studying exactly this structure, and what he found changed how we understand fear and memory together. The amygdala's job is threat detection. And when it detects something threatening, it does something remarkable. It tags the moment as urgent and sends a signal to the hippocampus, the brain's memory formation center, essentially saying, "This one matters. Lock it in deep." This is why you can recall painful memories in vivid, almost cinematic detail. The tone of someone's voice, the exact words, where you were standing. Your amygdala treated that moment like a fire alarm, and fire alarms come with extra memory reinforcement built in. Good memories rarely get the same treatment. A pleasant lunch with a friend doesn't threaten your survival, so your amygdala stays quiet. No alarm, no urgent tag, no reinforcement request sent to the hippocampus. The memory forms weakly, and over the following days and weeks, it fades the way most ordinary information does. This isn't a flaw. It's a design choice evolution made a long time ago, and it made sense at the time. Psychologist Roy Baumeister, along with several colleagues, published research showing that across nearly every measurable domain, bad experiences carry more psychological weight than good ones of equal intensity. He called this pattern, "bad is stronger than good," and it shows up almost everywhere researchers look. Losing money hurts more than gaining the same amount feels good. A single harsh criticism can outweigh several genuine compliments. One relationship conflict can erase the emotional residue of many pleasant days together. Baumeister's argument was simple. If you're an organism trying to survive long enough to reproduce, missing a threat is far more costly than missing a reward. Fail to notice the fruit tree, and you go hungry for a day. Fail to notice the predator, and you don't get a second chance. So evolution built a brain that treats danger like breaking news and treats pleasure like background noise. Which means the wiring making you replay that harsh comment from your coworker at 2 a.m. is the exact same wiring that once kept your ancestors alive on the savannah. But there's another piece to this, and it involves not just how memories form, but how they get destroyed, or rather, how they don't. Cognitive scientist Daniel Kahneman spent much of his career studying how people evaluate their own experiences. And one of his most cited findings involves something called the peak end rule. When you recall an experience, your brain doesn't average every moment of it. Instead, it leans heavily on two data points: the most intense moment, the peak, and how the experience ended. Everything else gets compressed or discarded. This explains a strange asymmetry. A wonderful vacation with one miserable afternoon can feel, in hindsight, tainted by that afternoon, especially if it happened near the end. Meanwhile, a genuinely difficult period in your life that improved right before it concluded often gets remembered as a not that bad, purely because of how it wrapped up. Negative peaks, in particular, tend to be sharper and more physiologically intense than positive ones. A jolt of humiliation activates the body more forcefully than a moment of quiet contentment. And the more intensely your body reacts in the moment, the more aggressively your amygdala flags it for long-term storage. So bad memories aren't just remembered more often. They're remembered more vividly because the emotional spike that created them was louder to begin with. Now here's the part that reframes everything. This system, this whole architecture of threat tagging and vivid encoding, was built for a world that no longer exists. Your amygdala can't tell the difference between a predator crouched in the grass and an email from your boss that starts with, we need to talk. Both trigger the same threat response. Both get the same urgent memory tag. Your brain is applying survival era pattern recognition to modern social and emotional situations that were never actually life-threatening, and it's doing it with the same intensity it would use for an actual physical threat. This is part of why an offhand critical comment from a stranger online can occupy more mental real estate than an entire day of things going right. It's not that you're overly sensitive or emotionally weak. It's that your alarm system doesn't know the difference between danger and discomfort. To your amygdala, they can register almost identically. There's a term for what happens next, once that memory is locked in. Rumination, the tendency to replay negative experiences over and over. Psychologist Susan Nolan Huxma researched this extensively and found that rumination doesn't actually help people process difficult emotions the way many assume it does. Instead, it tends to deepen the emotional groove, making the memory even more accessible and paradoxically even more painful with each replay. Each time you revisit that argument, that mistake, that humiliating moment, you're not just remembering it. Because memory is reconstructive, you're rebuilding it, and often reinforcing the emotional charge attached to it in the process. The bad memory doesn't just linger, it gets sharper with use. Like a knife, you keep running your thumb along, checking if it's still sharp, and somehow making it sharper each time. Good memories, meanwhile, don't get this treatment because there's no built-in mechanism nagging you to revisit them. Nothing about a pleasant, uneventful day requests replaying. You don't lie awake reconstructing the ordinary parts of an ordinary week. So while your bad memories are getting polished and reinforced through repeated recall, your good memories are quietly eroding from simple neglect. This creates a strange kind of feedback loop. The more your brain revisits threat-tagged memories, the more accessible they become. And the more accessible they are, the easier it is for your brain to retrieve them the next time something even faintly similar happens. A single sharp criticism years ago can end up shaping how you interpret feedback for the rest of your life. Not because it was objectively catastrophic, but because your brain kept rehearsing it long after the moment itself ended. Here's the twist worth sitting with, though. Once you understand that this asymmetry is a design feature and not a personal failing, the whole picture shifts. You are not doomed to a life of remembering only the worst things that happened to you. The system that overweights negative experiences is ancient, but it isn't unchangeable. Psychologists who study memory and emotion have found that deliberately pausing to notice and reflect on positive experiences, actually sitting with them for a few extra seconds instead of letting them pass by unmarked, can measurably increase how well they're encoded. It's sometimes described as savoring, and it works precisely because it borrows the same mechanism your brain uses for threats. Extra attention plus emotional engagement equals stronger memory formation. You're essentially tricking your own alarm system into treating a good moment as significant enough to keep. This doesn't erase the pain of real difficulties, and it shouldn't. Painful memories often carry genuinely useful information, warnings your brain is trying to preserve for good reason. But it does mean the imbalance you feel, the sense that bad things somehow outweigh good ones in your memory, isn't a reflection of how your life has actually gone. It's a reflection of how your amygdala was built, in an environment where missing a threat could end everything, and where a pleasant afternoon by the fire was never going to save your life the way noticing a predator would. So the next time an old humiliation resurfaces at 2 a.m., word for word, exactly as sharp as the day it happened, you'll know what's actually going on. It isn't that the moment mattered more. It's that 300,000 years of survival wiring decided on your behalf, without asking, that danger deserves a permanent record, and everything else gets filed under forgettable, whether you agree with that decision or not.